really find out about our speakers. You know, I don't sit here and read a paragraph going, Tom is. I leave it up to you to introduce yourself. But we've got Tom Manganello, who's a senior counsel at the SEC that's going to talk to us about investor safety. Tom, you've got 31 people on the call right now. So that's a slightly larger group than we usually get. So I know there are lots of people interested in what you're going to tell us.
Hey,
It's
I
all
feel
yours.
honored. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Gary. It's a real pleasure to be invited to join your meeting today. What a wonderful weekly tradition that you have, and it's great to be able to share some insights into what we do when we have a nest egg, how we protect our money as we move through our retirement years. I am Tom Manganello. I am an attorney. I work for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission in our downtown headquarters office. Are there any former or current federal employees on the call today? I would imagine there are, given the Arlington. Yeah, wonderful. So great to be here with you. Our headquarters is next to Union Station. If you've been down to the train station, we actually are physically connected to Union Station near the McDonald's, which is at the Amtrak gates, right at the upper level of Union Station. We've been there about 20 years. It's a lovely building. We're right next to the Thurgood Marshall Federal Courts building, and maybe I don't know, a 3-iron from the U.S. Capitol building. And very good location. We have 11 regional offices around the country in addition to, actually, I should say 10 regional offices in addition to our headquarters, because we closed our Salt Lake City regional office, which was a very small regional office. We merged that with our Denver office. I work in our Office of Investor Education and Advocacy, which is, as the name would imply, our education function. We have about 5 staff members who do talks like this. We have about 25 staff members who answer phone calls and emails from investors who have questions about their investments or their investment professionals, and they try to guide them and help them with those endeavors. I will share our contact information at the end of my presentation. And we have about 8 or 10 staff members in our office who write for our website. Our website is investor.gov. I'll share some information on that as well. Prior to my time in OIEA, which is what we call our office, I worked for our enforcement division. So I investigated violations of the federal securities laws, things like insider trading or Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes or pump and dumps or other type of market manipulation scams. Even investigated some cases where folks were accused of accounting fraud, where they were cooking the books of publicly traded companies to make either the profits of the company or the stock price of the company perform better than it actually should have. We don't like that. We like transparency. We want investors to know exactly what it is they're investing in. And when they read those quarterly or annual reports for a publicly traded company, whether it's Costco that we were talking about a minute ago or some other company, we want that information to be sound and where you can take it to the bank, make it an informed investment decision. Very briefly, the SEC has 3 missions, right? We want to protect investors first and foremost. We want to facilitate capital formation, and we want to keep the markets fair and orderly. And when I think of those 3 missions coming together, I think of somebody who might have a really tremendous idea, some novel approach to a product or to a service. What do they need? They need capital, right? They need to take this great idea and bring it to scale, bring it to market. They go to the markets, to the exchanges, whether that's the New York Stock Exchange or whether it's the NASDAQ or some other exchange, where groups of investors are investing their money. What are they doing? They're providing capital to some company that can then use that to build factories, build widgets, build innovation. What do we need from markets? Well, we're investors. We may have a 401k. We want a market that is fair, sound, transparent. When we invest our money, we want to know what it is we're investing in, what the risks of that investment might be, and we want to understand how those investments are doing over time with periodic reports. while we do those two things at the SEC, we want to make sure that Main Street investors are equally situated with Wall Street investors or hedge funds or huge, you know, mutual fund complexes, whatever that may be. We want to be fair. And at the same time, we want to protect investors. So if there are bad apples, if there are bad actors who are defrauding investors, lying to investors, stealing money, we want to get those bad actors out of the industry. And that's something that the enforcement division does. We're a civil agency. I should point that out because some of you may have worked for the Department of Justice or some other law enforcement function. The relief that we bring at the SEC is civil. In other words, we get penalties, we get disgorgement, we can get money back from people who defraud investors. We don't send bad guys to jail unless we work with our friends at the DOJ and we bring a case parallel and in tandem with them. So that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about my agency. Now let's see if I'm capable of sharing my PowerPoint presentation with you. I think I am. We tested this beforehand. I like to introduce drama, but actually we're going to do this successfully. Okay, this is what we're calling the presentation today. It's Never Stop Learning, because indeed, we don't ever stop learning. When you finish your undergraduate degree or your graduate degree, when you work an entire career, you're learning throughout this, you're innovating. New technologies come around. First, we get taught by our children how to text, and then we do it ourselves. First, we get taught what TikTok is or what YouTube is or some other, editing function. My kids are great at this, but I'm not afraid of it because after they tell me about 16 times, I pick up on some of these things. Well, we don't stop learning about our nest egg either, or about our money. And so we'll talk a little bit today about some steps that we can take at this point in our life. Maybe we've already worked. Maybe we've built up that nest egg. Maybe we're moving money around, and we want to be careful when we're doing that. And we'll talk about some of those things. Those of you who worked for the government know that when we speak publicly, we provide a disclaimer. The views I express today are not necessarily the views of the Securities and Exchange Commission or the 4,500 employees that I work with. We're not providing legal advice or even investment advice either. I always like to point that out because we are talking about tenets of sound investing, but I'm not going to give you a hot stock tip because at the SEC, we are neutral. We are unbiased. We don't recommend specific companies or funds or that sort of thing, but we want you to be informed when you make these investments. I mentioned a minute ago that we have a website. If there's nothing else worth writing down today, this might be it, or bookmarking while you're sitting here on your computer. This is our website. It is investor.gov, or if you prefer, www.investor.gov. And this is what our landing page looks like today. Changes from time to time. A couple things I do want to point out if you're going to jump onto this website so that you know that these resources are there. I put two big red arrows right off to the left. The first one is our Never Stop Learning page, which has many of the concepts we will discuss today in greater depth and some additional resources on that. And right next to that, okay, you see the red 6-pack right in the middle has some very hot topics, what they say, never stop learning. The middle one says resources for older investors. That's another great spot where you can find things that may be applicable to you and other things that may be relevant or not. Crypto assets, tools and calculators, understanding fees, and our monthly investing quizzes. If you like to see how much you know about investing, we change these up every month. Let me show you one of these pages. The older investors page has some of the topics we are going to cover today. If you look on the left bar there, learning investing basics, monitoring your account, adding a trusted contact, understanding fees, researching investments and professionals. We're going to talk about all these things in the next 45 minutes. Cover them in short and succinct fashion, but when you want to get more information, get on this Older Investors Never Stop Learning page. You'll see a lot more there. And the Never Stop Learning page, same thing, additional stuff that you can take to the bank, learning about investing, monitoring accounts, conducting background checks. This will give you some additional guidance when you want to dig in a little bit. As I say to my younger audiences, right? This may not be the moment where you're focused on your finances. I don't focus on my finances all year round. I really don't. I tend to give them a really good, strong look at the end of the year. Maybe there's some things you want to do, whether it's contributing to an individual retirement account or preparing for your tax filings or whatever it may be. You tend to get those statements in the mail or in your email at the end of the year. That's when I focus on it. And so sometimes I just bookmark pages like this and say, ooh, I want to come back to this because I do start to pay attention to this later in the year. Or maybe it's now. We have a public service campaign right now. It's running on television stations. It's running on the internet. It's running, I don't think we did radio or newspapers this year, but you'll find some of the content if you're browsing the web or looking at your cable TV stations. You'll see some of our ads. And oh, this is my prompt to see if I can stop sharing this and show you a 30-second ad. Let's see if I can do that. All right. Now I want to share. Let's see. I want to go here. Yeah, I think we can do this. No, that's not it. All right. Apologies. It is. Stop share there. Share here. Don't you love Zoom? It is actually a really great thing, but here's the problem. Zoom is under my Edge, my Microsoft Edge, and so is my video. So how do I parse that? Let's see if I can do it. Let's go. You know what? I think I'll just not do it. Yeah, I'll share the link to the video. It's complex when you're using the same application and have to go to a different window, and it escapes my my IT capabilities. So let's dive into the substance. I'll share a 30-second video in the chat box when we get to the end and we're taking answers and questions. Okay, first thing we want to remind ourselves when we're thinking about investing is just to go back to the basics. Remember what we were taught, if we were taught anything about investing. I have to tell you, I grew up in a school system that didn't have lessons on saving and investing. I had home economics, which you would think might be able to incorporate some of that. But what I mostly learned how to do there was to make no-bake cookies and a few rudimentary recipes. I appreciate that, but I really could have used a little bit, what's a credit card? What's a checking account? How do I balance my checkbook? How do I start making investments? What's a 401k? Right now, I'm happy to report 26 states in the United States require some level of personal finance instruction as a requirement for high school graduation. So we're getting a little bit better at that. If you have children, if you have grandchildren, they might be in a state where they're starting to see personal finance incorporated in their curriculum. But for us, let's just remember back, the money that we keep in the bank has no risk. It's protected by something we call federal deposit insurance or National Credit Union Insurance. NCUA offers a similar type of insurance for money that's kept in a credit union. But money that we invest, we're actually placing at risk, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but it's not, because money invested has a better chance at a greater return over time. So how do we reduce the stress or the agita of investing? Well, you do that by two steps. One is choosing where to put your investments in the first place, asset allocation. And the other is making sure that you spread your investing eggs among multiple different baskets. Diversify. Diversifying can lower the risk of investing. Now, what do we invest in? Turns out with investments, the potential for greater return typically comes with greater risk. So the yellow arrow that you see on this chart is sort of your investment risk and return arrow. I've put a few common investments in here and approximately where they might fall on the investment risk and return arrow, right? The money we keep in the bank and the credit union, whether it's in our savings accounts, our checking accounts, or even those certificates of deposit that are paying slightly more interest these days, they're somewhere near the bottom left. The money is safe there, but the return is typically modest, right? We're still getting less than 1% for most of our checking accounts, most of our savings accounts. My most recent certificate of deposit or CD, I think was paying almost 5%. So you can get some significant interest rates on CDs, but of course you're locking that money up for a period of time. It functions a little differently than your checking account or your savings account. Somewhere in the middle on this risk return line would be where I would place bonds or the funds that trade in bonds. Bonds are where we're loaning money to the government or loaning money to a corporation. They're going to hold that, use that over some period of time. They typically will pay us interest over that time, and later they return our principal. That's how bonds work. Bonds are somewhere in the middle here. I don't know what you're getting for your bonds. Maybe it's 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, something like that. And that can vary depending on the quality of the company or government entity. They are rated by ratings agencies and et cetera. So that changes from time to time. And then you see what I have in the upper right. I have stocks, publicly traded companies. I have stock funds, mutual funds, index funds, it's exchange traded funds, those sorts of things. Why do I have them on the upper right? Well, because stocks have done quite well over time. If you go back even 100 years to the stock market crash of 1929, stocks have paid somewhere between 7% and 10% over that last century, depending on how you factor inflation and dividends and that sort of thing. However, any particular company's stock price may have considerable risk or fluctuation depending on a number of factors that I won't get into here. Factors that range everything from how the management is doing, how the competitors are doing, how that industry is doing, how taxes or government regulations are impacting that company, and 100 other factors, right? Even if bad weather happens to hit a particular warehouse or factory that company owns, that can impact the stock price. So I have stocks on the upper right. Why? Because potential for great returns are there. Yes, we've seen that. But there's also more risk with stock investing. Higher risk, higher upside.
We
Why?
got a question here that maybe you can clear up a misperception. You'd mentioned savings accounts being insured, through the FDIC. I have a question here. How much is the FDIC insurance per bank account?
Yeah, the insurance goes up to $250,000 per account. And I put a little asterisk there because recently there were 2 or 3 bank failures. And if I'm not mistaken, the FDIC insured accounts beyond the $250,000. So there were bank insolvencies, and yet they opted to insure even beyond that limit. But certainly up to $250,000, no one has lost a penny in a bank or a credit union over the last 100 years. Why? Because they've been insured up through insolvency. No one has lost a penny through that bank or that credit union's failure because of this insurance. Good question. So when I showed you that risk and return chart, that last one, which I'll go back to here, why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because maybe you're moving money around. I don't know if you are or aren't, but if you're moving money from one account to another or changing your investment from a individual retirement account to something else or a 401k to something else, I want you to know this because this helps you make intelligent decisions about where you place your money. Because with asset allocation, you're choosing how much of your money might be in your house, your equity in your home, or your savings account in your bank, or your bond accounts, or your stock funds, right? And the 2 most important things to consider when you're deciding how to allocate your assets is first, and perhaps foremost, your time horizon. When am I going to need this money? You know, for your grandchildren who are 22 years old and just starting their first job, they don't need their money anytime soon. They probably won't need that retirement money, at least the portion of their money that's put into their 401k. They probably won't need for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, depending on when they want to retire. So time horizon is really critical in deciding where to put your money. And the second piece that kind of goes along with time horizon is your risk tolerance. I know for me, I was far more risk tolerant when I was in my 20s than I am now that I'm in my mid 50s, right? When we're in our 20s and that 401k account value goes down, we're not happy about it, but we have a long time to recover, right? We don't need that money right now. We might not need that money for decades. It's a very different story when we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, when our time horizon shortens. And typically, when our time horizon shortens, we're going to take fewer risks, less risk over time. So that's the two things that guide me anyway when I think about asset allocation. And it's kind of a reason why did many of you have options, whether it was in your individual retirement account or whether it was in your 401k, to choose what's called a target date fund? You may remember, if there were a few of you who were federal employees, you may remember the L funds or the life cycle funds that is offered through the thrift savings plan. Those are target date funds, right? Where you're actually choosing a target date sometime in the future. And your asset allocation is determined by the date that you choose. So just to take an example, if you were someone who wanted to retire in the year 2050, perhaps you choose a 2050 target date fund or the 2050 life cycle fund that's in the thrift savings plan. Well, when you look at that asset allocation of someone who still has whatever 25 years to go in their work life, you're going to see that it's mostly stocks. Why? Why mostly stocks? Well, because you're not too worried about the risk of a market drop. You have 2.5 decades to recover if there is one of those short-term market drops. And you're more concerned about growth. You want those stocks because you have a better chance at a higher return over time. You're willing to be at the top end of that risk and return arrow we showed you earlier. Why? You've got a long time horizon. It's typically different if you plan to retire next year, 2025. Now, your risk tolerance is going to be lower. I don't want to take as much risk if I think I might start tapping into my nest egg as soon as next year. And so when you look at a target date fund that's a 2025 fund, you're going to see a much more conservative mix of investments, probably some stocks for sure, because even if you retire in 2025, right, you may live 10 more years in retirement. You may live 20 more years in retirement. The really genetically gifted among us may live 30 more years after retirement, 40 more years after retirement. I've seen it happen, and it's wonderful. But the fear, of course, is, hey, I don't want to outlive my money, so I want some growth there. There will still be stocks in your portfolio, even if you retire next year, even if you retired a few years ago. But maybe you're going to see more bonds, you're going to see some more cash, you're going to see some more treasuries, some more conservative investments. Why? Because now we're at the point where we're in the decumulation phase of our growth, of our investing life, right? We're using our nest egg. We're not just in the building phase that we were in our working careers.
I have a question here on your risk reward
Yeah.
arrow. Where would you place annuities? And the second part is, what risk comes when the insurance company reinsures the policy with a private investment capital based in Bermuda? And in parentheses, they said this has happened. So
So I'm not going to comment on that second one, not knowing, what we're talking about there, but where would I put annuities? So annuities are more of a insurance product. When we buy annuities, we're paying an insurance company some money upfront for the privilege of having the insurance company give us a monthly payment later. Is that a fair sort of summary of what an annuity is? What are the risks? Where would I put this? Well, a couple things on annuities. First thing, you can find more information on annuities on investor.gov by going to the search tab in the upper right and typing in annuities. I want you to understand what some of the risks are. Some of the risks are fees. You pay fees usually for annuities. In some circumstances, relatively high fees. The annuities that we see that are being marketed to junior service members, for example, people in their 20s that are, probably not really the best candidates for annuities, but they have very high fees. So check out the fee structure. Other risks, what would they be? Maybe the insurance company fails and isn't able to follow through on the annuity payment that you signed up for. Maybe the payment that you've negotiated is impacted by the impacts of inflation over time. So those are some risks there. I don't know where I would put it here on this particular graphic, because I don't necessarily consider it a pure investment as much as an insurance product. Most annuities are regulated by state entities. If you're in Virginia, the Virginia Department of Banking or whatever might be or the Department of Insurance might be the entity that regulates these. So check out investor.gov if you have specific questions and want to learn more about annuities. As for the risk of being, I forget what the second part of that question was, something about a company being transferred to Bermuda. One of the concerns there, without knowing any of the facts for me, would be, I hope this is not a company seeking to avoid oversight or regulation by U.S. entities, whether that's the Department of Insurance in Virginia or whether it's the SEC or some other federal entity. That would concern me a bit, and you certainly should ask about that. Okay. We were just talking about, we talked about time horizon and how that makes us take less risk over time. We're willing to take more risk early. But I want to point out that diversification is another strategy that can reduce the risk of investing. So whatever you're invested in, to the extent that you're investing in more, like say you're in stocks, you also have some bonds, you also own a home, some of that's real estate, you also have some money in a bank or a credit union. You've diversified your portfolio by having different asset classes, stocks, bonds, cash, treasuries, real estate, whatever. Even within an asset class, you can reduce the risk of investing by spreading your investing eggs across multiple companies. So the easiest example of that is sort of like an exchange traded fund or an index fund. Instead of maybe buying a handful of stocks on Robinhood or through Charles Schwab. Right, this is a graphic showing the S&P 500 index fund. These are the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States. And if you bought shares of this fund instead of buying a couple stocks, now you're more diversified. An example might be, say all your money, your whole portfolio was invested in Microsoft stock, which is shown in the red box in the upper left corner of this graphic. The red companies here went down in value on this particular day. The companies colored green went up in value. So someone who only held Microsoft stock would have had a really bad day here. They're not diversified, and they're subject to the whims and vagaries of one particular company. Whereas someone who said, you know what, I don't really want to just hold a stock or two. I'd rather have a S&P 500 index fund that has exposure to all 500 of these companies. Well, now on this particular day, just looking at the greens and the reds on the graphic, maybe you broke even. Maybe you even posted profits. That's sort of the theory of diversification, that there's safety in numbers. If one particular company has a bad day, or one particular sector even, right? The technology sector at the top left here, which includes Microsoft, Oracle, Adobe, a couple other companies. Looks like they did poorly today. But when you have a more diversified portfolio like an S&P 500 index fund, now you have exposure to financial companies, consumer electrics, consumer cyclical, restaurants, the defense stocks, industrial stocks, real estate stocks. Now you're more diversified and there's safety in numbers. You may reduce the risk of investing. Here's another good tip. Keep an eye on your accounts. I don't do this every single month, and I don't even do this every single quarter, but like I said earlier, about once a year, I do take a look at how my accounts are doing. I certainly want to notice whether there have been withdrawals I didn't authorize. Okay, that's the easy thing to check for. Most of my accounts I don't really take withdrawals from yet. I'm still in the accumulation phase, but I take a look at that. I also want to see if I need to rebalance any of my investments. Some people do this because maybe they want X percent of their portfolio to be in stocks, X percent in bonds. And maybe something's happened in the market this year that has thrown your numbers out of whack. Maybe stocks have done so well or bonds have done so well that you need to rejiggle how you monitor or how you allocate your assets. This is always a good time to check the fees that you're paying. You can see fee information in your offering statement if you purchase a new fund or if you consider a new fund. You can ask your investment professional the fees that you're paying and make sure you're comfortable with those. And it's also a good time to make sure you're using strong passwords. Okay, not just the easy one you also use for your bank. You don't want the same password for your brokerage account and your bank and your 401k and all that, right? So if one lucky hacker out there gets it right for one thing, you don't want them to be able to get it right for all the places that you keep your portfolio and your nest egg. What else? Oh, my boss, Lori Schock. She wrote a really nice director's take article. The title is My Money Going to Run Out in Retirement? And it's one of many director's take articles she's written. You can find those right on our landing page of investor.gov, right under additional resources, which is the tab on the far right. You can see it on the left here. If you go under the additional resources, the light blue or teal colored box there, pull down that drop down menu, you'll see the director's take articles right where that red arrow is. Or just look these up by name, director's take. It'll take you right to them. What do I want to say about fees? Well, pay attention to them. You know, even small fee differences can have an impact on your investment portfolio over time. This is critical. What type of fees are there? There's so many, right? There are account opening fees. There are fees when you buy or sell investments. There are advice fees. There might be year-end fees, loads, commissions, things that are charged when you make transactions in securities. Ask about them. Understand them, right? If you're working with an investment professional, certainly fees should be a portion of the conversation that you have, whether you do this once a year or even more often. What am I paying you? How do I reduce these fees? What am I getting for this money? What are some alternatives to what I'm paying you? Pro tip: if you are choosing among funds, maybe you're choosing a fund within your 401k, choosing a fund within your individual retirement account. Even if you're going to stay within the whole Vanguard family or the whole Fidelity family or whatever it might be, actively managed funds typically have higher fees. Okay, these are funds that are set up to try to beat the market. Somebody is selling you on either the skill of the manager or the algorithms or the software or the artificial intelligence or whatever they say gives them the edge over the market. They are pretending, or not, I shouldn't say that. They are promoting themselves to have a benefit. You're choosing an active fund, you're going to pay higher fees typically for that than you would pay for a passive fund. or an index fund, where you are literally getting a basket of stocks that is predestined, right? If it's an S&P 500 index fund, you're getting those 500 companies. They're going to typically have lower fees. Those actively managed funds have to do that much better in performance to make up for those higher fees. So try to keep that in mind as you're choosing funds. You'll pay more for the active funds. Does it make a difference if I'm paying a quarter point versus a half point versus a full point? Oh, believe me, it does. We did this hypothetical, right? We took a $100,000 portfolio. We tracked it over a 20-year period. The blue line is a quarter point fee. The red line is a half point fee. And the green line on this graphic is a full point fee. And I think you can see in the early years, you can't really distinguish the difference that much. But by the end of the 20-year period, someone who was intuitive enough to choose that lower fee, quarter point fee product would have $30,000 more in their account than the person who paid the full point fee over those 2 decades. So it really does make a difference. We want you to pay attention to this. And this, by the way, is only assuming a 4% return over that time for all 3 accounts. You know, as I said before, the more accurate return is probably between 7 and 10% over long periods of time, which would only exacerbate these differences in fees. How do you compare fees if you're choosing among 2 different funds? Well, our friends at FINRA have a very useful tool. It's called Fund Analyzer. You can put more than 30,000 mutual funds or exchange traded funds into this tool and get an apples to apples comparison of the overall expense ratio of many different funds. Expense ratio includes all those fees put together. So I did want to point this out. Our folks that we speak to find this to be a very useful tool, especially when they're thinking of moving money around. Sometimes I'm talking to federal employees who are retiring within the next year or so. Maybe they're thinking of moving their thrift savings plan into some other fund. Not always a great idea. TSP has very low fees, very good investing options. But if you're moving money, that's the moment to pay attention to what you might pay in fees over time. The other thing we want to research is investments. If you're going to move that money, I want you to know what it is you're investing in. Take your time. Don't be rushed. No legitimate investment requires you to make a rash decision. You have the time to read those disclosure documents, understand what you're getting involved in. If it's a publicly traded company like Costco or Amazon or Microsoft or IBM or Home Depot or Coca-Cola, you can see and learn so much about them on our EDGAR system, the electronic database gathering and retrieval system on the SEC's website. You can see the risks that management perceives. You can see who the officers and directors of a company are. You can see audited financials, see if the company is profitable or mired in debt, and so much more. You can see their quarterly and annual reports to investors like you. That's just one tool to research investments. I heard some of you say you read the New York Times. Some of you may read the Wall Street Journal. If you have a library membership, you might be able to see Morningstar or Value Line at the Arlington County Public Library, things that can allow you to do research on investments. For free, you can get on Google Finance or Yahoo Finance or so many other websites that can help guide you when you're considering what to do. And of course, I always have to put a plug in for investor.gov. The other thing, if you're going to work with an investment professional, clearly I want you to check them out before you use them. Why do I say this? Why is that even important? Well, it is important because, as I've seen in our enforcement division, so many of the scams that target retail investors like us are created, promoted, and implemented by people who are not licensed or registered investment professionals. They pretend to be, but they're not. And so if you just take this one step and do a background check. Make sure the person you're considering is a licensed broker or is a registered investment professional or investment advisor. You can cut out at least that portion of scams that are perpetrated by the unregistered folks. You find out if they're licensed and registered. You see even their employment history. Where have they worked? Have they had customer complaints? Have they had disciplinary actions brought by their employers? All things you might want to know when you're working with your nest egg. And this is how it looks. If you get on our website, investor.gov, the most prominent function on the landing page is the check out your investment professional tool. This is how it looks. You can type in the name of that investment professional right there in the white box near this happy group of people who are having a backyard barbecue and helping each other with by sharing information on investor.gov. What's another thing we should chat about in our remaining few minutes? One thing is, while we're young, while we're healthy and capable, we can take certain steps to protect our ability to deal with our money, even if, God forbid, something might happen, like we have a health crisis, we fall, we have a stroke or a heart attack, and we're not, for some period of time, able to handle our own finances. So what are some steps we can take? Well, certainly we can talk to a trusted family member and simply say, hey, I want you to know, son, daughter, friend, these are my finances. I would like it if you could help me if I'm ever in a situation where I need help. To prepare for that, we certainly want to be organized, and we're probably already doing these things, right? We want to have all of those important documents in a logical place in our house. Make a list of our account information, our bank accounts, our brokerage accounts, our important financial information. Organize that, right? Maybe they're all in the same drawer, the bank statements, the mortgage statements, our insurance policies, our Social Security payment information. If we're lucky enough to have a pension or some other income stream, we have that in with our key documents. And if there's someone you trust, make sure they have contact information for your investment professional, if you have that person, or the person at the bank that you work with. Even some of your doctors, it could be helpful to have them know who it is you're working with. Now, if you have a brokerage account, a fund, you should have been prompted over the last couple years to add a trusted contact to that account. They should have reached out and said, do you want to add a trusted contact? If they haven't, you can reach out to them and say, I'd like to add a trusted contact. Why? Because if that person, that professional, that investment professional or broker thinks that there has been a scam or a fraud perpetrated on your account, or they're having difficulty reaching you to ask you about that account, or if you come into the office and you're disoriented or not acting yourself or trying to wire $1 million to Nigeria, they may be able to reach out to that trusted contact and say, hey, dad was just here. He wants to send $1 million to Nigeria, or whatever they may say. Can you make sure he's okay? He was slurring his words. He didn't look well. They can at least reach out, say, hey, see if everything's okay. And they can hold some of these transactions until they ensure that you're doing okay. This doesn't give them power over your account, but it does give them an ability to reach out to someone you trust to make sure you're okay. Then there are these other steps that you can take in increasing level of involvement. A minor step might just be telling somebody an overview of your finances. You might just say, hey, to your daughter, I have an account, most of my money, my 401k and my investments are with Vanguard, and I have some money in PNC Bank. Okay. Just want you to know that. A second step you might take is say, and here I have my annual statement from Vanguard and my annual statement at the bank. I'm going to give you a copy of those just so you understand where they are. I trust you to know my account number, etc. Another step you could take is to have them join you when you speak to your banker or when you speak to your investment professional. Hey, Joe, this is my daughter. I want her to be familiar with my investments. I brought her along today so she can hear what you're saying and so that she can start to play a role in how I'm managing my money. And finally, an additional step that you can take, and this is sort of the financial equivalent of if you have a living will or an advance directive on the health side. Some people have a actual legal document that gives someone the ability to make medical decisions for them if, God forbid, they're incapacitated. Well, this is sort of the financial equivalent. You can get a power of attorney, something you hire an attorney to do, draft a document so that if you have a stroke, if you're incapable of communicating or managing your finances, somebody that you trust and that you've designated through this power of attorney may be able to assist you in that unlikely circumstance, but God forbid it happens if you become incapacitated. Now, another thing we should mention is when you're in the decumulation phase of investing, when you're tapping into your money, when you're taking withdrawals or distributions in retirement, there are resources out there that can help you. One of which is, at a certain age, you have to take required minimum distributions, right? RMDs. We have an RMD calculator. But pay attention before I move to that slide. When you're making these decisions, am I going to roll over a retirement account? Oftentimes those rollovers are tax-free, but you want to make sure you're choosing a place to put it that makes sense. Pay attention to fees. Follow the rules. If there's rules that apply to your rollover, look on the IRS website, which happens to be irs.gov. Then look for the rollover rules. Make sure you're complying with those. And when it comes to RMDs or required minimum distributions, I think right now the RMD requirement is at the age of 72. That is slowly moving up over the next few years to the age of 75 as a result of the Secure Act 2.0. You want to follow the rules with RMDs. One tool that can help you is on investor.gov under financial tools and calculators, which is where that red arrow is. We have an RMD calculator that allows you to put in your previous year-end balance, your age at the time, and calculate how much you need to pull out as part of your RMDs. That's just one of the many tools and calculators you can find on investor.gov. Now, let's finish today with scams because we see so many. Remember these tips on avoiding investment fraud. If an investment sounds too good to be true, trust your gut, avoid it, right? Because there is no free lunch. There is no overnight riches to be had. I've never met a single person who's made millions of dollars overnight. Everyone I know who's become a millionaire has done it by putting a little bit of money away with each paycheck and continuing to do that throughout a long career. It's a long game. It's the turtle, not the hare, that wins in the investing game. Be careful. If you're asked to pay for an investment with Target gift cards, with wiring money through Western Union overseas, with paying in cryptocurrency or other unusual formats, don't do it. Scammers like these payment methods because it's very difficult to trace them. As I said earlier, don't be pressured to buy quickly. No legitimate investment requires you to make a rash decision. Take your time, do your research, and remember that those testimonials that you see on TV for whatever the investment may be, whether it's gold, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's reverse mortgages, the people doing those testimonials are being paid to make the testimonial. That doesn't mean it's a good investment for you. Even if that person happens to be on Blue Bloods or some other program we like, we don't want to make our investing decisions based on a familiar face, an influencer, a star, a celebrity. Those ads and many others that you see on YouTube or Reddit or anywhere else on social media are going to prey on your fear of running out of money or your fear of missing out on the latest investment craze. That's not only popular among young people, FOMO, fear of missing out. They have that when they see something on TikTok, but we have it too. I mean, we don't want to miss out on a good investment. We have a fear of running out of our money. Sometimes we don't ask questions when we're talking to our investment professional because we don't want to look unintelligent. Maybe they've used an acronym, and in the back of our head, we're thinking, oh, shoot, I should know what that acronym means, but I don't. Should I let them keep talking or should I interrupt here? Here's where you interrupt. Hey, sorry, you just said ETF. I'm sorry, I forget what that means. Can you talk to me like I'm in 5th grade? What do you mean by that? Or can you repeat that strategy you just suggested? That did not make sense to me. And I just want to make sure I get that. It sounded like it was very important. And if it still sounds like gobbledygook, maybe this isn't right for you, right? If something's so complex that we don't get it, I don't know if that's the right investment.
I have a question. I'm on the telephone. Can I ask a question?
Please do. I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good. Okay. So this has to do with the FDIC insurance. So I asked this question at my bank, and he handed me an FDIC brochure, and he explained to me that it's each account category, not each account. So they have 8 categories at FDIC, and each category is insured by $250,000. But as to quote, all deposits that an account holder has in the same ownership category at the same bank are added together and insured up to $250,000. My checking account and my savings account and my CDs all fit into one category. So all of those added together each of those accounts added together are insured $250,000. If and I don't, had a revocable trust account, that would be an additional $250,000. If I also, and I don't, have a joint account, that would be an additional $250,000. But the FDIC has 8 categories, and each category is insured up to $250,000.
That was not my understanding. Do we have any FDIC employees on here? And it sounds like if you're concerned about this, you might want to put money in different banks. Oh,
that's what. So anyway, this is a hard copy of a brochure printed by the FDIC. So So pick up one of those brochures.
Yeah, so
I'd say.
I'm not a banking expert, but if it is a concern, obviously one solution, and it sounds like, is to move money. And if you have more than $250,000 in a single bank, is to move money beyond that into another bank. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing, and on your website about the trusted contact, why is it only for brokerage and not for banks and credit unions? Because that would be a handy thing to have for a nice protective. Why is it limited to brokerages?
No, that's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I do know that banks and credit unions will try to reach out to family members if a name has been provided.
No. I tried because I had an issue. My permanent address disappeared, and so I got very upset by that. It wasn't replaced with another one. And anyway, I got that whole thing fixed, and I could never find out who did that and why they did it. All I know is the bank fixed it. But that's when I said, well, I'd like to have a trusted person. But they said they don't do that. They do not do, you have a beneficiary. So then I went over to the credit union and said, I want my beneficiary added on as a trusted person that they could contact. And they said they don't do that. So it's only brokerages that do it. But it'd be great if banks and credit unions did that.
Oh, I agree with you. Thank you. No, I agree with you. What are the tactics?
So that's it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm off now. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. These are some tactics that scammers will try to use. They will pretend that you can make money quickly overnight, be wealthy. They will pretend that they have great credibility, even if they don't. We've heard of people who brag about having an HSD degree in finance. You know, an acronym sounds impressive until you realize what they meant by HSD was high school diploma. They have a high school diploma in finance. Scarcity. This works at the car lot, right? When you want that Lexus with the leather interior and this metallic trim. Oh, I only have one of those left. Sometimes this happens in investing. I need to hear from you by Friday, or this investing option or offer is off the table. Reciprocity. How many of us have been invited to a free steak dinner at the local hotel? These are nice things, right? Good, delicious dinners. We hear all about investing. Well, it turns out they're probably going to want to direct you to the funds that they get commissions for. Doesn't mean it's a scam. They may work for a legitimate fund complex. They're teaching you about something about investing. They'd love it if you moved your thrift savings plan into their fund. They get a fat commission out of it. What do you get? You know, maybe nothing. You get a free steak dinner, but you shouldn't feel obligated to move your nest egg into that fund just because you enjoyed the free steak dinner. Take some time, make sure it makes sense for you. Ignore unsolicited offers. When you don't recognize the phone number, don't pick up. If the email comes and it has an attachment or a link, don't click on that. Social media, same. Lots of ways that scammers try to reach us. Let's just try to remember, if it's an unsolicited offer, let's ignore it. Fraud sometimes targets us because of a community that we're involved in, whether it's a church, a synagogue, a alumni group, a fraternity, a sorority. Be careful. Just because you have a reason to trust someone doesn't mean you should forget to do that background check we talked about. Go through those steps. Have a secure account. Many of us have a good password. Add in that two-step verification. At first, I didn't like this, but now I really like that when I log on to my bank, I put my my email address, I put my password, and then it texts me a 5-digit, 6-digit code. I plug that in. That's one additional step to protect your accounts, and I think it works very well. When you're on investor.gov, you're going to find a lot of information. Here's just a few recent alerts that we've written that can help you be a more informed investor. And there's hundreds of others. I just chose a few that I saw in the last 6-9 months that have been on there. And remember, if you have questions about your investments or your investment professional, there are ways to reach us. If you have a scam that you've seen out there, we want you to report that to us. Here are 2 ways to do this. I'm going to share my slides, by the way, afterwards, so you won't have to memorize all this good information. And if you have a moment to fill out a very quick survey, we're constantly trying to improve the way that we create these PowerPoint slides and the way we present them so that they are relevant, timely, actionable. We would love it if you have 2 minutes to answer, I think, 3 or 4 questions. I just put a survey link in the chat box. If you have a moment now or later today to do that, that would be awesome. And with that, I will stop and see if there are additional questions that we haven't covered yet, or anything else that I can cover for you.
Okay, we've got one question. Other than contacting your financial institutions, what other steps should you take if you feel like you've been scammed or suspect you've been scammed?
Yeah. Well, there is some very good information on that. Actually, we just put out a investor alert that says how victims of securities law violations may recover money. Let me put it right now in the link. Also, Federal Trade Commission, FTC.gov, federaltradecommission.gov has really good information on steps you should take if you've been scammed. SEC alert on how victims can recover money. I'm putting this right now in the chat box. I hope that reaches you and you can check that out. It's also right on our landing page today. If you get on investor.gov, it's the very first investor alert or bulletin that's in the gray box in the center bottom of the landing page. Federal Trade Commission has a page too that helps people work through steps if they've been scammed, especially if you think your identity's been stolen, that sort of thing, or your bank account has been intruded upon. There are steps that you can take. Any other questions?
Well, we had a comment earlier talking about traditional versus Roth IRAs or retirement funds.
Yeah.
They said with the Secure Act 2.0, a large traditional IRA can create tax consequences for an inherited IRA.
Yes, there are tax consequences on inherited IRAs. That is absolutely true. And if I'm not mistaken, you have 10 years to pay down or withdraw the inherited IRA. I'm not an expert on that, but I believe that's what it is. Of course, the difference between traditional and Roth when you're contributing to them is with a traditional, you're getting a tax break in the year that you make the contribution, right? You lower your taxable income in that year. That money then grows throughout your career. And when you take the withdrawal or the distribution later in life, in retirement, that's when you pay taxes on it. That's traditional. Tax break early, pay taxes later. Of course, Roth is the exact opposite. When we chose Roth or choose Roth, we are paying the taxes immediately. It's an after-tax contribution to an investment. That money then grows throughout our career. And then when we take the withdrawal in the Roth case, no taxes later.
We had an early question. Do you think the overturning of the Chevron rule by the Supreme Court will have a material impact on SEC's mission?
I hope not, but there is a potential that could happen. You can read about that in gosh, look up Chevron under Supreme Court rulings recently. There have been some changes to the deference given to decisions that are made in federal agency courts, for lack of a better term, the administrative law judges that work within multiple agencies, including the SEC as well.
We've got a question here. If you want to sell stocks, who do you contact?
You can contact a broker. Brokers are investment professionals that can buy or sell securities.
Okay, and we've got a comment here. You were talking about not getting scammed. Somebody referenced the recent gold bar scam that people have gotten scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes, and where did I just see our friends at FINRA have a very good, let me see if I can find that, but better to even find it than to just tell you about it. FINRA just released a alert on gold yesterday, I thought. Let me see if I can find it very quickly. Oh, this is not the one they released yesterday, but I'll put it in there anyway. It's Golden Rules for Investors, What to Know Before Buying Physical Precious Metals. Certainly, it's relevant, but if I had a minute or two to do a more a more fulsome search, I probably could find the one that they put out yesterday. I think it addressed that gold bar scam, but you can probably find that in your news searches as well. Yeah, there are
And,
scams involving gold and other precious metals. And sometimes it's not just a scam, it's just an extremely high fee that's involved with the purchase of that, or an inability to sell it either quickly or at all. So be careful if you're thinking of putting money into gold and other precious metals.
a comment here that ftc.gov, you can also request annual credit reports.
Yeah, and there's a website, annualcreditreport.com, where you can get each of the 3 major credit reporting reports on you: Equifax, Experian, and what's the-
TransUnion.
TransUnion. Thank you. You can do that once per year. So from each of the 3 credit rating bureaus. So you can that's something that's good to know, whether you have an open line of credit that's you don't realize is still there, whether there have been erroneous charges to that have dinged your credit, for example. You can each one of those 3 agencies has a way to dispute erroneous credit information.
You know, Tom, I'd add with respect to credit bureau reporting, just an advice to everybody, is to freeze your credit rating at those credit bureaus. I know that there was a point in time that I had free reporting because of some, my materials were stolen, blah, blah, blah. Well, so you get the report and you'd see, yeah, somebody's trying to set up some kind of account, and that's nobody could do anything about it. All you ended up knowing was, oh, look, this is going on. So I decided at that point to freeze all of my credit reports so that if anybody tried to use them for something, they couldn't do it. It's an inconvenience to me, for sure, but it's also good peace of mind.
Right. And the inconvenience to you is especially if you are going to try to secure a mortgage or buy a car, the 2 most common ways that we all use credit. But if those 2 things are covered and you don't expect to be needing to do that sort of thing, I guess it's less of an inconvenience, right?
Right. Well, my sister was out shopping for a car recently, and it turned out that all of the dealerships she went to put in a credit check on her, which then prompted other things to start snowballing
Oh, I
because
see.
of so many credit checks that had been done. So she lost some unlimited balances on her American Express. I mean, just a whole little Rolling Stone gathers moss.
That's true. Now, of course, if the way that you purchase cars now is to pay in cash and not take out a loan, that may not impact you.
Mhm.
Comment here that Michelle Singletary has an article in the Post today regarding credit freezes versus fraud alerts. So
Okay, good. I
perfect
read her
time.
column regularly.
I have a question. This was a really good presentation, so thank you very much. How do we get a copy of the slides?
I will send them as soon as we hang up today, and then perhaps they could be distributed by email. Is that right?
Yeah, well, what we'll do is if you send your slides, we'll forward them to the A&V office. And anybody that wants them can call the office or email the office and get a copy that way.
Okay. I'll send them momentarily.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, could you give the telephone number to call to get the slide or the video?
Sure. Marcia, have you just, are you an A&V member?
No, I was
Okay,
Christian.
that's okay. No problem. I'll put our phone number in the chat, and Gary can just keep everything alive for a little while.
In the chat. So
Yeah, I'll put our web address and phone number in the chat. Can you get to that?
what does that mean?
Okay, our phone number is 703 509
509
8057.
8057. 703-509-8057.
Yeah,
And all I do is call you and ask it be sent.
I'll give folks an alert that you're going to be calling and they'll know what to say to you.
I see. Very good. Thank you.
We're happy you joined us today.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad I joined. And my husband would be here, but he's away right now.
Good.
On a plane.
All right, well, it's almost 11:15, so we
Steve, were you
probably
trying to
should
raise your
wrap
hand
this up.
or say goodbye? It looks like he was trying to say goodbye.
Yep.
Tom, thank you. Great information. It looks like SEC has a really beautiful website that, we can all start getting educated even more on everything that you've talked about. So we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you
Helping
for
TV
having me, and I do hope the website is a continued resource for all your members.
Great. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Take care, all.